The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations, but never had its crystalline walls trembled with such palpable dread. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak, his 6 arms gracefully manipulating the holographic controls, called the emergency session to order with ceremonial precision that masked his inner turmoil. Fellow beings of the Council, his translated voice resonated through the neural implants of 200 species. We gather today to address the situation with humanity. The newest members of the galactic community had been problematic from the beginning. Unlike every other species that had achieved faster-than-light travel, humans hadn't followed the established protocols. They hadn't sent diplomatic envoys or cultural ambassadors. Instead, they had arrived in crude metal ships bristling with primitive kinetic weapons and had somehow managed to defeat 3 piracy fleets using nothing but accelerated chunks of metal and what they called tactical nuclear devices. Counselor ZYX9, representing the silicon-based Nexus Collective, projected anxiety through her mineral formations. Chancellor, their refusal to acknowledge the tribute protocols threatens the entire galactic economic structure. For 12 millennia, the Council had maintained order through the tribute system. New civilizations paid a percentage of their gross planetary product to established Council members in exchange for protection, technology sharing, and trade agreements. It was logical, efficient, and had prevented countless wars through economic interdependence. Every species, without exception, had eventually agreed to the terms. The alternative was economic isolation, technological stagnation, and eventual absorption by more aggressive neighbors. The humans received our formal tribute orders 6 standard days ago, Chancellor Vorthak continued, his ceremonial robe shifting color to indicate deep concern. According to our Xenolinguistics department, they fully comprehended the terms, conditions, and consequences. The terms had been generous, considering humanity's primitive technology level. A mere 15% annual tribute in exchange for quantum computing matrices, antimatter containment technology, and full council membership privileges. Most species eagerly accepted such favorable conditions. Ambassador Krill of the Hegemony Worlds leaned forward, her photosynthetic skin darkening with worry. What was their response, Chancellor? The hall fell silent except for the harmonic humming of the translation matrices. Chancellor Vorthak's primary consciousness interfaced with the central database, retrieving the transmission that had arrived from Earth's capital system 3 days ago. The entire response, he began, his voice barely maintaining official composure, consisted of a single word in their primary language. The assembled delegates waited with the patience of beings who measured time in geological epochs. Several species had evolved beyond the need for respiratory functions, yet the silence seemed to demand held breath. The word was. Vorthak paused, consulting his cultural database one final time, no. The translation matrices struggled with the concept, sending confused queries through the neural networks of species that had never encountered such a response. Several delegates required emergency psychological stabilization as their worldviews cracked under the impossible simplicity of humanity's defiance. Surely there was additional context, pleaded Elder Morpheus of the Ascended Realms, his energy form flickering with distress. A counteroffer? Terms for negotiation? A request for clarification? Nothing, Vorthak confirmed. One word. No explanation, no justification, no acknowledgement of consequences. Simply. No. The implications rippled through the assembly like gravitational waves through spacetime. In 12,000 years of galactic civilization, no species had ever simply refused the tribute order without presenting alternative terms or seeking compromise. The word no in the context of interstellar diplomacy was not merely unprecedented, it was conceptually incomprehensible. Counselor ZYX9's mineral lattice structure began vibrating at frequencies that indicated existential crisis. How do we process this? Our diplomatic protocols have no framework for absolute refusal. That's not our primary concern, interrupted Admiral Thex, the Council's military coordinator. His warrior species had conquered 40 systems before joining the Council peacefully. The real question is what happens next. Do they understand what they've done? Chancellor Vorthak accessed humanity's preliminary cultural assessment. The data painted a picture of a species so fundamentally different from galactic norms that their psychological profiles required entirely new classification systems. According to our xenoanthropologists, he began carefully, humans appear to suffer from a collective psychological condition they term independence. They demonstrate a pathological aversion to external authority structures, regardless of the benefits offered. The concept was so alien that several species translation matrices crashed, requiring emergency reboot procedures. Independence as a species-wide trait was theoretically impossible according to established evolutionary psychology. Social beings required hierarchical structures to survive technological advancement. There's more, Vortak continued, his voice dropping to what humans might recognize as a whisper. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected unusual activity in human-controlled systems. Mass industrial mobilization. Shipyard expansion. And most disturbing, they've begun retrofitting their civilian vessels. Ambassador Krill's photosynthetic processes ceased entirely. Retrofitting for combat modifications. They're converting cargo haulers into missile platforms, research vessels into electronic warfare ships, even their mining equipment into kinetic bombardment systems. It appears they're preparing their entire civilization for war. The mathematics were staggering. Humanity controlled nearly 24 star systems with a combined industrial capacity that dwarfed most council races. If they converted their peaceful infrastructure to military production, they could theoretically field a fleet larger than the Council's combined peacekeeping forces. But the true horror wasn't in their numbers, it was in their mindset. They don't see this as a business negotiation, Vortak realized aloud. They interpret our tribute order as a declaration of war. Elder Morpheus's energy form brightened with sudden understanding. They said no because they believe they can win. The silence that followed was pregnant with the weight of galactic history. Every previous civilization had joined the Council through peaceful negotiation because warfare against established galactic powers was economic suicide. The cost of military resistance far exceeded any possible benefit. Humans, apparently, had performed different calculations. What do our strategic analysts predict? Asked Admiral Thex, though his warrior instincts already suspected the answer. Vortak's consciousness dove deep into classified military projections, scenarios that assumed the impossible, total war between humanity and the Galactic Council. The models painted pictures of devastating conflicts that would reshape the galaxy's power structure regardless of the outcome. They predict, he said finally, that even if we defeat humanity militarily, the economic disruption would destabilize the tribute system for centuries. And if they achieve even partial success. He didn't need to finish. The assembled delegates understood. One word, no, had potentially doomed 12 millennia of galactic peace. As the session adjourned in chaos, none of them noticed the small human observation ship that had been monitoring their discussions from the system's edge. Captain Sarah Rodriguez smiled as she reviewed the translated proceedings, then composed a brief message to Earth Command. Council scared, she transmitted. Recommend we send them a dictionary. They're going to need to learn a lot more English words soon.